8:33, Election Day just 2 days away, and it's still a very tight race in the polls.
Yeah, and joining us right now is WGN political analyst Paul Lisnek to break it all down for us. Paul, thanks so much for joining us.
Well, we're all going on vacation together this week, so this is a...
is that what we're doing?
That's the plan.
I did not get that memo. Let me just search my email really quick. I did not get the itinerary. Talk about what's going to be happening on Tuesday. A lot of early voting happening in a lot of the swing states. We've been seeing all the reporting. How much of this is going to be coming down to this last 2 days?
Well, that's a great question. First of all, the polls, of course, show everything is tied, right? And you almost always see that. But what tends to happen, Sean, is that the swing states, the 7 swing states, if they break, when they break, they don't tend to break evenly. They tend to break in one direction or another. The problem is we're just not going to know that until election night. And no, I don't think we get presidential results on election night. Yeah. But at this point, in the last 2 days to go, so much, as you said, so many people have already voted ahead of time that the various ghastly things that happen mean less and less as that day 48 hours from now approaches.
And so, I mean, we're seeing that most people are decided in terms of who they're voting for.
Yeah, I got to say, this is not, people like the undecideds, well, there's no undecided, there's a few undecideds, but this is a turnout election. This is about who gets their people to the polls, which is why you see door knockers, which is why you see Harris and Trump in these locations. They're not saying, please vote for me over the other side. They're saying, please get to the polls. We already know you've decided.
Talking about polls, let's talk about the polling that's been happening. We've seen this now since 2016. Where the polls simply do not reflect what we see on Election Day and the actual results. That in mind, there's this new Des Moines Register poll that just came out yesterday, and it shows Kamala Harris leading by 3 points, 47 to 44% over Donald Trump. That's something I don't know if even the Harris campaign thought was going to be happening.
That doesn't happen in Iowa, and in fact, Trump really hasn't played Iowa that much. It's a sure thing. But that poll, Sean, was conducted by a woman named Ann Seltzer, and she is like the guru of polls in that her polls are accurate. It doesn't mean she's wrong here, not wrong here, but she is accurate. And so this is a very unheard of thing to see that. Now, is that a bellwether kind of look or not? We don't know. But what we are seeing is this. We're seeing a lot of growth in Harris's camp for 65 plus voters, and they vote a lot. That's typically a more Republican vote. We're not seeing that. But of course, I think here the real question is going to be the young people who are so energized, but will they vote? We know traditionally they tend not to, but we're now seeing that the 18 to 25 category in early voting is actually up higher than it's been in past years and over other younger, relatively younger votes. So we'll know more when we see who's showing up to the polls, but Harris seems to be doing well in some of those categories which wouldn't typically be strong for a Democrat.
That was a question I had for you in terms of the young voters, those first-time voters, those that have just turned 18. Like, how significant is their role in this election?
It can be significant if they actually go to the polls. You know, some people are comparing this to the Obama 2008 because Obama had a way of reaching young people, getting them excited and energized. Harris has some of that going on. She's not Barack Obama, but in many ways that shift, the magic for the Democrats was when Joe Biden stepped down and Harris stepped up for this. And I understand that angered a lot of Republicans for a host of reasons. We don't, can talk about it if you want to. But the bottom line is Democrats who were so dismayed about what was going on, given this level of hope, I think that's what bodes well for them coming to the polls because things really shifted for them when that candidacy changed.
This race, I think, but more than any other that I've seen, is being run on social media. TikTok, Instagram.
Big time.
Stories. And a lot of that stuff can be taken out of context, I think.
You think?
Talk about what you are seeing in reporting from these swing states where one clip can go viral that might not tell the whole story about what someone said.
I'll give you one example from the Trump side. The other day, we all woke up to the news that Trump had apparently, in his interview with Tucker Carlson, had said Liz Cheney should be put before a firing squad. And so that was like, whoa, what is that? So I went back and I watched in context, the full discussion. And I watched it several times. He didn't say that. What he was talking about were the fact that legislators find it very easy to send people off to war, but they themselves would be the first to run away from battle. Now, he took it perhaps too far when he sort of brought Liz Cheney up into it and created that scene. But his mission was about war. It really wasn't about Liz Cheney. So my point, and for those folks who have their feelings about Trump or not, that's not my point is, you've asked me about things being taken out of context. That was one example of something which really was taken out of context, and the message wasn't as clear. Now, the Democrats Democrats actually worked that very well to make it look like Liz Cheney got a lot of people angry, and that stuck. So that was one example where things were taken a little out of context and really didn't have the message that he was trying to send.
And of course, the presidential election is top of mind to most folks.
Yeah.
But of course, there's other races that are on the ballot here in Cook County State's Attorney, here in Chicago, Chicago School Board. What are some key points that people need to keep in mind?
Well, it's a great point, because what's bringing people to polls most likely, let's be honest, with all due respect to the Cook County State's Attorney candidates, because yes, it's an important race, but basically the presidential race and the school board races are what's bringing Chicagoans to the polls. The congressional races, the state rep, the state senate, there's no, I mean, they're contested, but there's no real races to be watching there. That is not sending people to the polls. So we also have some ballots, referendums on the poll, but people should know that none of them, I know there's one about should millionaires pay more in tax. There's actually one about the Bears Stadium, should Chicagoans pay money. There's one about the Obama Library, should we give people residential help. None of them are binding. They don't really matter. They're a way to try and get people excited and bring them out to the polls. But the bottom line is it's a message to the legislature. Here's what we're thinking about this. Of all of those, the one I'm watching is the millionaire's tax, because that would be the third time that an effort has been raised to raise tax on people. Illinoisans have said no to that twice before in different forms, the graduated income tax and such. We'll see what they say to this one.
All right, Paul, thank you.